Members, it's the appointed time and we have a quorum. The morning session will end at 12:30 p.m. and the afternoon session will begin at 2:30 p.m. and end at 7 p.m. If necessary, the meeting will be extended by a maximum of 15 minutes. If members have any direct or indirect pecuniary interest on the items to be discussed today, please disclose the nature of such interest before you speak according to Rule 83A of the Rules of Procedure. I also call to members' attention voting arrangements in case of direct pecuniary interest under Rule 84. We will continue to deal with FCR 2020-21 number 50. The item invites members to pass the item discussed by the PWSC on the 27th of May 2020 on the upgrading of part of 75RE as 76RE entitled Pre-Construction Activities for Expansion of Hong Kong Science Museum and Hong Kong Museum of History to Category A at an estimated cost of 72.8 million in money of the day prices, and the retention of the remainder of 75RE in Category B. Members requested separate voting on the proposal at the Finance Committee. The Public Works Subcommittee spent about 2 hours and 58 minutes to scrutinize the above proposal, and the Finance Committee also used 1 hour and 9 minutes to discuss the paper. At the meeting yesterday, the chairman announced that he would draw the line at 9:30 a.m. today. I declare that I am a consultant of Bank of China, Hong Kong. To answer members' questions, Mr. Jack Chan, Undersecretary for Home Affairs, and his team are in attendance. Mr. Ted Hui, point of order, Chairman. Due to the epidemic, the epidemic is getting worse and the gathering prohibition has been tightened and the agenda of the council has been shortened as a result, but I didn't see any decision at the Finance Committee. Did the chairman and deputy chairman consider canceling or shortening the Friday FC sessions? Or have you negotiated with the virus and that you believe that the virus would not spread in the chamber, in the electrical complex, including room 1? Myself and the chairman can review the latest position of the Finance Committee in light of the epidemic. But at the very least, the morning and afternoon sessions today would remain. And in light of the development, we will inform members of the latest development by Thursday or Friday. Mr. Wu Shiwai, speaking for the third time, 3 minutes. Thank you. The Director of Architectural Services said she would consider holding a design contest. And you also mentioned the views of the user departments. This is a signature building complex. What is the view of the Home Affairs Bureau in organizing a competition? Would you facilitate a design contest for this very unique building cluster? These are facilities that will remain in operation, and this is a rare chance for architects to show how they can revamp the buildings while they remain open. This is certainly an iconic project in a prime plot of land. We have taken in views from different camps, and they have been duly considered. We believe we can incorporate views through a design contest for part of the development. A few years ago, the ArcSD worked with the LCSD on various projects. For instance, the renovation of Hong Kong Museum of Art, and we won a number of international awards. In order to secure funding approval at LegCo, we must do a proper job, and a design contest is certainly something we would consider, at least for part of the project. But this proposal deals with the pre-construction activities, and it's about incorporating the design in the main building. The Undersecretary said at least part of the development could be open for a design contest. So which part are you referring to? Are you referring to Site 1 and Site 2? What would be the ambit covered by the design contest? You need to provide the specifications. After the pre-construction activities, the consultancy would recommend the part of the development that is suitable for a design contest. Well, they might hold a design contest that covers a very small area. So in terms of the conditions raised by the user departments, if the consultancy decides on a design contest as a result, then the picture would be very clear. Undersecretary, the view is well noted. Mr. Elishu, 4 minutes. Mr. Chen Pan, speaking for the first time. Thank you. In terms of the Hong Kong Museum of History, hardware and software are equally important. Like Ms. Claudia Mo said, software is a very important component. Undersecretary, how can we ensure that history would not be tampered with? How can we ensure that we would present the correct history? For instance, Lin Zexu destroyed the opium, and the view was that it was to facilitate the Brits. Is there any mechanism to ensure that history would not be tampered? Mr. Chan? We have a quality team at the LCSD, and for years we have upheld professionalism and impartiality. So in terms of our curations and exhibits or exhibitions, they are conducted in line with history. For years we have won international acclaim, and this is something we will continue going forward. Please be reassured that we have a professional team in place, and they would make sure that our exhibits and curations are professional and in line with our guidelines. We have expert advisors who would provide recommendations on every project, and we would also consult the Committee on History under the Museum Advisory Committee, and we will also invite views from academics, including those from the international arena, and we will certainly play a proper role in gatekeeping. We have confidence in the Home Affairs Bureau. But if you are relying on certain committees to establish certain historical facts or contexts, what would be the outcome? Look at what happened with liberal studies. I hope the Bureau and Department would keep a close eye on the work of the committee in this regard. We will certainly do our job. We are also very happy to listen to the public as well as members. Mr. Eddie Chu, speaking for the second time, 4 minutes. Thank you. In terms of tampering with history, I'm sure the Communist Party has done the best job. Earlier, when the exam paper question of the HA DSE was discussed at LESCO, some members ignored the fact that the Japanese invasion led to ruling by the Communist Party, and they ignored such facts conveniently. And according to these people, the Hong Kong Museum history must be politically correct. Mr. Chan and Pan is worried that certain facts were skewed. I wonder whether slogans such as ending the one-party rule, liberate Hong Kong, revolution of our times, I wonder whether these could be presented at the Museum of History. For pro-communist people who want to use the Hong Kong Museum of History as a tool for brainwashing or propaganda, well, I have my concerns. I wonder whether the museum can remain professional and impartial, as the Undersecretary suggested. My view is that when you talk about history in Hong Kong, it's about politics. The new facility would be embroiled in politics. For the Hong Kong Science Museum, the case is more straightforward. It would not be embroiled in an argument between Chinese science and world science. If that's the case, you should first separate the Museum of History project, and the other facilities could be presented separately. Is this possible?
Mr. Chen. Thank you, Chairman. During the meeting yesterday, I've already said that the present proposal includes not just the Science Museum and the Museum of History's expansion. These are just part of the projects. There are also other parts that are equally important. One is to connect or enhance the accessibility and connectivity between the two museums so that we can better utilize the space. And second, to enhance the existing facilities provided for public enjoyment. So we have to look at the project as a whole. We cannot split them into different pieces. Otherwise, it would defeat our purpose. Well, Chairman. Well, I think the argument on political issues will not end in Hong Kong. So I believe that after the completion of the project, the History Museum will no longer become a history museum. It could become something else. Can we just work on the hardware first and then talk about the software later on? Well, the History of Museum was opened in 1998. It was very popular among people of Hong Kong and also won a lot of international acclaim. And we have over many people visiting the museum over the years. So we really want to enhance it and also expand its existing structure and facilities so that more people could enjoy it. All right. On the list, we have 5 more members waiting to speak. And it's only about 10 odd minutes before we will draw a line. So for those members who wish to speak, please come down to the meeting room as soon as possible. Mr. Ray Chan. Chairman, we are talking about the whether we can handle the expansion projects for the two museums separately. Well, this is in fact a pre-construction project. It is not to talking about how to build or further make constructions on the museum. It is just the pre-construction works, including tendering process and also the infrastructure enhancement, etc. So I'd like to ask about some technical questions. When we look at the Annex 6 to Enclosure 1, there are two sites. So which museum is going to use which site? One is of 1,900 meters square and the other 7,600 square meters. Is it that you have not decided on it yet? You have to wait till the design is finalized, or when you are in the second stage, then or when funding is available, then you'll be able to know how to make use of these two plots of land. I heard the Undersecretary said that the Science Museum will use the biggest site, whereas the Museum of History will use a smaller site. But looking at the paper, I don't see that differentiation. In Enclosure 1, Para 2, A to K, there are some descriptions, but then this description does not help me to understand which museum will be using which site, or what facilities will be on which in which museum. Could you elaborate on that? Undersecretary. Thank you, Chairman. As Mr. Chan has mentioned, we indeed need to have the funding approval from the Finance Committee so that we can engage consultants to do the preliminary work. After that is finished, only that can we decide on how to make use of those land. But generally speaking, for Site 1, it will be mainly used for the expansion of the History Museum. The Site 1 is of 1,900 square meters. Site 2 is of 7,600 square meters. So Site 2 will basically be used by the Science Museum. We do have some preliminary thoughts. That is, after expansion, the total gross floor area will be increased from 31,000 square meters to 58,000 square meters. So it's over 90% of expansion. So this is to make a better use of the land. And for the gross floor use area, we will be able to expand it to 15,000 square meters. Among which 13,000 will be used by the Science Museum and 2,000 odd square meters will be used by the Museum of History. Thank you. So it seems that it would be difficult to separate the expansion projects of the two museums. And also ask questions about the permanent exhibition and also themed exhibition galleries. Is there such a differentiation in the Museum of History right now? Can the permanent exhibition space be enlarged? Yes, we do have these two exhibitions. That is one for permanent exhibitions, the other for thematic exhibitions. For the permanent exhibition gallery, it is on Hong Kong story. It started from 2001 up to now. It's 19 odd years, and it is very welcomed by the general public. For the thematic exhibitions, we held quite successful ones in the past. We had one on Egyptian history and culture, the other on Dunhuang, and also Russian palaces, etc. So these are examples of the thematic exhibitions. Mr. Chen, what is the ratio between the permanent and thematic exhibitions, and also the space of these two exhibitions areas? Ms. Tam, in the History Museum, the total gross floor area is 17,000 square meters, and for the exhibition areas, it's 8,000, among which 7,000 square meters is used for the permanent exhibition. That is the story of Hong Kong. And for thematic exhibition, it's only 980 square meters, so it's under 1,000 square meters. We hope that after the expansion, we will be able to expand the thematic exhibition areas. That is, we have in our collection quite a lot of exhibits about the history and development of Hong Kong, and also there are some international exhibitions that we would like to stage after the expansion. We have received 137A from Mr. Roy Chen, so we will draw a line in 9:30. I hope that if you have any 37A, please submit it before 9:40. Okay, there are about 10 minutes more for you to do that. Dr. Fernando Chang, 4 minutes. Thank you, Chairman. Yesterday, the Undersecretary answered me saying that the story of Hong Kong will not touch upon the reunification of Hong Kong, or it will straddle across the reunification of Hong Kong with China. So I'd like to know how you would choose the themes or the major incidents in the history of Hong Kong after the unification. For instance, we have the anti-extradition law and also a lot of major social events after that. I wonder whether you would include those incidents in the story of Hong Kong exhibition. And also, right now in the story of Hong Kong exhibition, there is now a photo about people surrounding the Legislative Council in the 80s, in late 80s, and the description is that there were groups of tertiary education students gathering in Beijing, and it has changed and become first from the morning of the Huiyobong to become a social event which had attracted the support of Chinese people all around the world. And in Hong Kong, there are over 1 million people staging protests on taking to the streets to support the people in Beijing. But throughout the entire description, there was no mention about the June 4th incident, and there was no mention about what happened to Hong Kong after the massacre on June 4th. In Hong Kong, after the massacre on June 4th. So for these descriptions, I wonder how you chose the wording or the way you describe the incident. We understand that the Chinese government is very sensitive to any mention of the June 4th incident and the massacre in Beijing on that night. So the way you describe this photograph, is it true that it reflects how you would toe the line, and does it show that you will or you have received political censorship? Would that get more serious afterwards? Undersecretary. Chairman, today we are talking about a proposal on the expansion and the pre-construction activities for the two museums. Well, let me try to answer Dr. Jiang's question. We have reiterated time and again. I'm sorry, Undersecretary. Well, Chairman, I thought this expansion project will affect the permanent exhibition gallery, the stories of Hong Kong in the Museum of History. And I believe that there will be a kind of expansion and updating on the content of the history of Hong Kong exhibition. Well, right now in the permanent exhibition gallery, we do have the story of Hong Kong exhibition. That's true. So after the expansion, your exhibition in this permanent gallery will be revamped and updated, right? Okay, let me answer you on the story of Hong Kong. For the story of Hong Kong exhibition, it started in 2001, and in the past 19 years, it was very welcomed by the general public. So after the expansion, we will have an enlarged exhibition. But during the closing of the gallery, we have a more concise version of the Story of Hong Kong exhibition. Our preliminary thought is that the future Story of Hong Kong will be divided into two parts. First, we would take the chronological aspect to describe the development of Hong Kong, and second part would be a thematic approach. For the Story of Hong Kong, it will concentrate on not just the present several decades. We start from the ancient times and stretching from the ancient times to the Han Dynasty, and then to the Hong Kong under British rule, and then after reunification of Hong Kong to China. Of course, the unification incident is very important to the history of Hong Kong. And in curating this exhibition, we will adopt our professional and also impartial standards. And as I said yesterday, all these curatorship and contents of the exhibitions will be lawful. It will abide by the law of Hong Kong. Mr. Jeremy Tam? I have a very simple question. I remember that in the PWSC meeting, I suggested that I talked about Site 1 at that time during PWSC. The administration said that they would consider using footbridges to connect these sites with other parts of the area. So I'd like to ask again whether it is true that the connection of the sites to other parts of the district with footbridges will be included in the project, right? Yes, we have heard members and views and also the voice of the public. So we understand that the general public would wish to see an enhanced connectivity of the two museums with other parts of the district. For instance, connecting it with the Hong Kong Cross Harbour Tunnel, the railway station, as well as the Polytechnic University. So in our present proposal, we did include these into our plan. So we now have two plans. First is to start from the Tsim Sha Tsui East a commercial building linking it to the toll area of the Hong Kong Cross Harbour Tunnel. And second, we started from the east another commercial building to the Polytechnic University. So we have confidence that with funding approval, we'll be able to incorporate these concepts into our proposal, and we would ask the consultants to take a look at it and see whether this is feasible. If it is found to be feasible, then in the future, when we are going to apply for the capital cost for building of these projects, we will include them in our proposal. Thank you.
I remember that part of the Hong Kong Science Museum is about aviation. When the Science Museum and History Museum are expanded, in terms of the old Kai Tak Airport and Hong Kong's aviation history, would these be featured in the Hong Kong Museum of History? Mr. Chan? This is exactly the reason we need to expand both museums. Currently, the headroom of the permanent exhibition gallery of the museum is only 3.3 meters at the Hong Kong Museum of History. We have an authentic old tram at the Hong Kong Museum of History. We want to feature more such exhibits to showcase the how life used to be in Hong Kong, and we also want to feature older models of buses, and these are certainly interesting and educational exhibits we want to feature. Mr. Tam, would they be featured in the Science Museum or History Museum? For aviation-related exhibits such as an aircraft, would it be featured in the Science Museum? Would the exhibits you mentioned be featured in the Science Museum or History Museum? The software side of the museums would be further considered once the expansion is completed. But for the examples I mentioned, they would fall under the History Museum. For older buses, are you going to identify the exhibits later, or have you been in discussions with the owners of these exhibits already? I believe some of these exhibits have been secured, but there is no space to exhibit these items. Earlier, we secured funding for a heritage conservation center, and once the facility is ready, it can be used to house these exhibits. The time is now past 9:30 a.m. Members such as Dr. Lina Wong, Mr. Xiu Ka-fai, Mr. Ted Hui, Mr. Luk Chung-hong will be speaking for the first time. Mr. Ted Hui, a line should not have been drawn, but nonetheless, I would ask my question. A history museum is an integral part of any place because it reflects the history and culture of a place, and it is understandable that these facilities be expanded. But the government has no popular mandate. This is a government rejected by the people, and your work would naturally be difficult. The leftists would criticize that you are not following the path or directions of the Communist Party, and you would be accused of rewriting history, while the pro-democracy camp would accuse you of not featuring certain darker sides of history. In terms of the permanent exhibitions, public and school activities at the Museum of History, apparently the focus is on local culture and folklore, and you are focusing on ancient history. In terms of contemporary history, politics, and ideologies, you are apparently dodging them. You said you have an independent committee with independent academics and experts. How would you ensure that history would not be censored? For modern history, you would touch upon the waves of immigration in the 1980s and 90s, and that in turn was a result of the history at that time. Are you going to organize thematic exhibitions, for example, on the June 4th incident, which occurred more than 30 years ago? Would you have the guts to work with the June 4th Museum? That way you can show the public that you are not conducting political censorship, and you can show the international community that you respect history, and in turn you would win respect. Mr. Chan? Chairman, the Hong Kong Story exhibition at the Museum of History will feature the Japanese occupation, the post-war Hong Kong, and post-reunification Hong Kong as part of our modern history. These will be presented in a professional, impartial, and objective manner. What about the waves of immigration after the June 4th incident. Once the construction activities are completed, we can proceed to the curation. We have a mechanism in place to ensure that our curations and exhibits are professional, objective, and impartial. And you can see that the Museum of History has won critical acclaim internationally. In recent years, we have worked with prominent museums such as the British Museum, the Museum of Russia, and the National Museum. If the Hong Kong Museum of History is substandard, why would these prominent museums want to work with us? This shows that the LCSD is doing a great job in matching the museums. This is not about a lack of standard or quality. It's that you cannot avoid political censorship. So in face of political censorship or pressure, if you back down, you would be rejected by the international community. This is what is happening in Hong Kong right now across many sectors. Paragraph 10 of the paper mentioned that in terms of there are currently restrictions in terms of collaboration with international museums. Can you cite any examples that with more space or headroom you can work with other museums? Can you offer a few examples? Mr. Chan, I would defer to the LCSD. Ms. Eve Tam. Ms. Belinda Wong. Currently, the headroom of the Special Exhibition Gallery is insufficient, so when we work with the National Palace Museum or the Museum of Russia, a number of artifacts could not be transported to Hong Kong or the museum due to the lack of headroom. Some of them are exhibited in the foyer, but the facilities at the foyer are inadequate as well. So with the new Special Exhibition Gallery, we can exhibit bigger artifacts in the future. Mr. Hui, can you offer specific examples? Can you cite any examples? In the past, we worked with the National Museum or National Palace Museum on a Qing Dynasty exhibition, and certain curtains or partitions should not be brought to Hong Kong. And we worked with Russia in one of the exhibitions. A royal horse cart could not be transported due to a lack of space, so we had to place it in the foyer. Mr. Michael Look, thank you. The exhibits to be featured in the Museum of History has to do with the historical view or context, and this is something we cannot avoid. For historical events, they could not be dodged either, especially the origins of Hong Kong. Our future generation should learn about the past in order to understand the present. When we look at the context of Hong Kong and the entire world, the suppression by the U.S. on Hong Kong and our country was akin to what happened in the Qing Dynasty. And the U.S. had a big trade deficit at that time, and they attacked us. Well, and the UK also had a trade deficit with China, and they exported a lot of opium, which poisoned a lot of people. So that was part of our modern history. At recent times, a small number of teachers have embraced a robber mentality, and they are using such to educate our young generation. I expect more to be featured at the Museum of History. And this part of history is not highlighted enough in the current Hong Kong history or the Hong Kong story exhibition, especially the origins of the Opium War. Some people complain that the Opium War was described as an ordinary trade war, and such views have been challenged. After the revamp, I hope this part of history would be elaborated upon. And like I said on another occasions, Lin Zexu, as a pioneer of combating drugs in China, he played a major role to Hong Kong as well. Should a statue of him be erected, or would a memorial park be built to remember him? And he could be made part of our campaign against drugs. I have engaged in meetings with parents who are concerned about education. They hope that such elements be featured in the revamped Museum of History. That way, our children would learn about our roots, and they would understand the pains endured by our nation, including the Opium War, our resistance against Japanese invasion. There should be more features and interactions. That way, our young people can experience or learn about this painful history. Mr. Chan, Mr. Luk's view is well noted. So in terms of our future curations and acquisition of exhibits, we are happy to take in views. And like we said, the future Hong Kong Story exhibition will prominently feature Hong Kong after reunification. Mr. Peter Shiu. For the Hong Kong Science Museum and Hong Kong Museum of History, the expansion would allow the public to learn more about history, culture, and science. And there aren't a lot of views about the Science Museum, but for the Museum of History, many members offered their personal views. History cannot be rewritten. We agree that these two museums should be expanded so that our young people can learn about science and technology at the Science Museum and learn about history at the History Museum. But in terms of the actual issues to be covered, you should consult the public. When I was a student, I had a lot of interest in the subject of history because history is about our own story. Nowadays, a lot of young people do not know about our history, including how China was invaded by the alliance. We suffered for years before we gradually rose to prominence. There's a void among many young people, so I hope that the Home Affairs Bureau would reinforce their work. The Education Bureau also has a key role to play. If a civilization does not know about their roots, their history, and ancestors, if they do not understand or agree with their own history, this is a very sad thing. And I think this is the obligation of the government. So in terms of the expansion of the History Museum, I believe the majority of the public would support the idea.
My question is that if funding approval is given, how long will it take for the entire project to complete? Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Shields, for his view. And I agree to many of his suggestions. Regarding funding proposal, this is $72 million. If funding approval is given, we will be able to start the works from the third quarter of this year, and it is anticipated that it will be completed by Q4 of 2022. And after that, we will go back to the Home Affairs Bureau and also the Finance Committee to seek funding approval for the main works of the project. Undersecretary, well, the History Museum has been here for a long time, but I'd like to ask whether you have collaborated with the schools so as to arrange a special period of time for the school students to go to the museum to learn about the history of Hong Kong. Do you have this kind of arrangement with the schools? Yes, Chairman. Indeed, every year we worked with the schools very closely, and every year there are many school tours. Well, on average, throughout the past years, there have been over 67,000 students visiting the museum every year. Do they need to pay? Well, these are school tour visits. So we work with the schools. So that include over 67,000 visit trips. So they don't need to pay, right, if they are school tours. Well, the museum is free of charge. It's entirely free. Will there be curators or the docent guiding the school tours in the visits? I'd like to defer this question to my colleague, Ms. Wong. Yes, we do have docents providing guided tour to the school groups. Okay, thank you. Next, Ms. Tanya Chen, second round, 4 minutes. Thank you, Chairman. Yesterday, there were members asking about the design context, the possibility of staging a design contest. In the recent years, I find that there were less and less design contests in Hong Kong. Well, the last one, the major ones, would be for the West Kowloon projects, like the pavilion. Design contest had been staged. Well, of course, there had been some problems or scandals relating to the West Kowloon project, and then we have special task force investigating into the incident, and afterwards it has become more quiet. For the museums, I wonder if there will be more and more museums in Hong Kong. And for the Royal Palace Museum, Mr. Yim's architectural firm had got the contract for the project, and Carrie Lam thought that because they had experience, and so the contract was awarded to his firm. But then it seems that there had not been a lot of local architects participating in the contest. It seems that they didn't have the chance to participate in the design of these museums. Of course, Mr. Yin is a very prominent architect and designer, and he, of course, is entitled to his opportunity. But for other local architects, it seemed that they had no way of participating in the design of some major projects. There was no open tendering process either. I think I remember yesterday you your colleagues said that you would not rule out the possibility of staging this kind of design contest. And also it was stressed that this would be a very complex project because the museums have to be open during the construction period. So I'd like to ask if it is possible for you to stage a design contest. Do you really have a timetable for that? I understand that you need the funding approval first, and I'd like to see if it is possible or there is time to stage a design contest, not just for the local designers, but also it should be open internationally. I'd like to know how feasible it will be, or what would be the obstacles to doing so. And also, by when will you be able to decide whether such contests could be staged? Thank you, Chairman. We have answered similar questions. Of course, we don't rule out the possibilities, and we will consider this proactively to see whether we will be able to open maybe part of the projects to a design contest. We will consider this, and this will be added, or this element will be added in our preliminary design. We will ask the consultant to see which part of the project could be open for a design contest. I could ask the Director of Architectural Services to further elaborate on this, but please be assured that we have professional teams considering this issue. And for instance, the Maritime Museum, we have staged open contest for related projects. Yes, we are very willing to work towards this goal. Recently, the Environmental Protection Bureau there was a project and constructing a environmental protection station, and this project exactly was open to design contracts, and we have experience on that. We are willing to further consider this possibility. Thank you. We have 3 more members, Kwang Junyu, Chen Jijun, and also Fernando Cheng, all 3 minutes, and after that we will handle a 37A motion and are voting on this issue. Mr. Kwang, 4 minutes. Thank you, Chairman. This is a proposal to revamp the Science Museum and the Museum of History in phases. I wonder if during the construction works, will the museums be free of charge, and will it still be open, and then the entrance fee could be waived? And also, after the expansion, what will be the entrance fees for the 2 museums like? Well, I don't know how much income have the museums generated from its entrance fees, and I think it is more important to have people visiting the museums instead of making revenue from its entrance fees. And also, I'd like to ask about where is the Cheng War's ship? I remember that there was such a display in the museum, but then it's no longer there. It's displayed. It was displayed in the Science Museum. I wonder where it is now. Undersecretary. Thank you, Chairman. For the entrance fee of the 2 museums, my colleague could answer that. As far as I understand, both museums are free of charge, except for the thematic exhibition. As regards the Science Museum, children and also school students are free of charge, and the elderly could enjoy a 50% discount in the entrance fee. I'd like to defer this to our colleague in the HAB. Yes, for the thematic exhibition gallery, it is charged. There is a minimum fee, and we will have a the exhibition of Hong Kong story right now, and it is free of charge. For the Science Museum, there is an entrance fee, and the long-term arrangement, I think we could revisit them after the expansion. Yes, I suggest that it should be free of charge after the expansion. What about the Changwo ship display? I'd like to thank Mr. Kwong for your appreciation of our display. It was displayed on the second floor, and it is below the DC-3 passenger airplane. So because we're going to revamp these galleries in the future, we like to demolish a pole, but then for the display of this Changwo ship at that time, we have commissioned a specialist to design the model for us. It is no longer displayed in the Science Museum. It is in our collection now. But we understand that this is very important, and it is now in our store. We hope that in the future, if we have relevant thematic exhibitions, we'll be able to use this to display, to explain the development of science in Hong Kong. And this is the Zhenghua Treasure Fleet. It's very important. I hope that we'll be able to see it display again in the future. We'd like to thank the colleagues of the museum. So we really hope that you will continue with your good work. Thank you, Mr. Roy Chen. I asked about the permanent exhibition gallery and the thematic exhibition gallery. I hope that there will be enhancement to the permanent exhibition gallery as well. That's why I've put forward a 37A. I understand that from Para 10 that for the special exhibition gallery, it's only of a size of 980 square meters in size with 3.3 meter headroom. So it does not cater for presentation of large-scale exhibition with sizable exhibits. Well, I agree that if we are to enhance the exhibition or the museum facilities, I hope that we'll be able to have more spaces with with higher headroom. Even in Taiwan, I've seen that there are really very sizable exhibits in display. So it really can give out very strong impact. So it is really regrettable that we do not have the space to display this kind of artifacts. Well, I'd like to ask about the permanent exhibition gallery. What is the headroom? Is it also 3.3 meter? And what would the future headroom be for these galleries?
Ms. Wang, thank you. The headroom of our permanent exhibition gallery is sufficient. It amounts to 2 stories. So the main issue is with the special exhibition gallery. What is your plan going forward? The target headroom would be considered as part of the expansion project. From our experience, if the headroom amounts to 2 stories, it would be sufficient. Is that your target headroom for the special exhibition gallery? For the special exhibition gallery, the target headroom is at least 6 meters, with reference to special exhibition galleries of other museums. Dr. Fernando Chang, third round, please. Chairman, a lot of loyalists talked about the Opium War. And they said that obviously it was a form of British invasion at that time. And one of the culprits of the Opium War was Jardine Company. the East Indian Company was closed down, and the founder of Jardine persuaded the Brits to start the Opium War. I wonder whether the Loyalists know about this part of history. Recently, the Jardine group took out full-page advertisement at Ta Kung Pao and Wen Wei Bao, and the group supported the national security law, and the article was quoted by C.Y. Leung as well. I hope the Museum of History can present the historical facts in a clear manner. So in terms of political censorship, the Undersecretary said all exhibitions would be presented in a professional, impartial, and objective manner, and they would not breach the laws. But under the national security law, it would be hard to determine whether there are breaches. For example, the primaries held by the pro-democracy camp this past weekend were accused to might have breached the laws, and perhaps arrests will be made later. So for content relating to the June 4th incident and the anti-extradition bill movement and the related slogans such as "End the one-party rule," would they be deemed illegal? The government said the slogan "Liberate Hong Kong, the revolution of our times" is unlawful, and we are uncertain about related exhibitions. For language used in slogans or social incidents, they might be deemed illegal. I asked the government which slogans are deemed illegal, but they did not offer a reply. So, Undersecretary, when you deal with such historical facts, what is your treatment on the language use? Which would be deemed legal and which not? Undersecretary, in our curations and acquisition of exhibits at the History Museum or other museums, we would embrace a professional, impartial, and objective approach. And the key is that the laws of Hong Kong could not be breached. This is our long-standing practice. We must remain professional, and we must not breach the laws. With the Hong Kong national security law in place, in light of this new law, it would be duly considered. Like we said, if we are in doubt, we would seek legal advice, and we would act in accordance with the legal advice. How would they obtain legal advice? Would they obtain legal advice from the Department of Justice or the Commission to Safeguard National Security? I believe they understand your question, Dr. Cheung. Where would you obtain legal advice from? As far as I understand, the legal advisor to the Hong Kong SAR government is the DOJ. I would now deal with the motion moved by Mr. Ray Chan under Rule 37A. The bell will be rung for 5 minutes. Mr. Chan, please read out your motion. Under Rule 37A of the Finance Committee procedure, I move that the committee request the administration to increase the area of the permanent exhibition gallery of the Hong Kong Museum of History in the expansion project of the Hong Kong Science Museum and Hong Kong Museum of History, so that the History of Museum would have more space to accommodate more facilities and exhibits in the permanent exhibitions gallery to showcase the history of Hong Kong.
黐人嘅。係阿尹兆堅議員。
Mr. Andrew Wan.
係咪派咗飛大家冇啊？冇。有好翻啦，個 focus 又。
多謝主席。
Thank you.
各位同事啊，我
Members, I remind you that we are going to have a vote on whether we deal with Mr. Ray Chan's motion moved under 37A. The content is displayed on the screen.
好，請各位表決。
Please proceed to the vote. Voting is closed. The results are shown. 46 present, 16 in favor, 29 against. The item is vetoed. We would now vote on this item. Any division claim? The bell will ring for 5 minutes.
好，請
Please proceed to vote. Ms. Chen, Han Pan, are you going to vote? Voting closed. Results display. Present 47 members, 37 for, 7 against, 2 abstained. The motion has been endorsed. Next item is FCR 2020-21, paper 51. This is to request the committee to accept recommendation of the PWSC at its recommendation agreed at its meeting on 24th of June 2020. That is to recommend to the Finance Committee to upgrade 125KA to Category A at an estimated cost of $5,228.4 million in the money of the day prices. Members requested that this voting be conducted separately at the committee. I am a consultant of the Bank of China, Hong Kong. We have Mr. Joseph Chen Ho-lim, Undersecretary for Financial Services and the Treasury, and also representative from the Government Property Agency, and also the Architectural Services Department and District Planning Office, and the Transport Department to answer members' questions. First, Mr. Kwang Chun-yu. Chairman, government now is asking for 5,000 or $5.2 billion to build a new government offices in Changguan. We have the impression that the clinic and also the dental office will be for use of the civil servants only. And this is on a very prime land. And you're going to spend $5.2 million to build such a complex. And also in Changguan, you're going to build this building, but then the services, not all of the services will be open to the general public. You have to convince us why is it worthwhile to spend such a large sum of money to build this building. And we also don't know whether it will have cost overrun. And it will be built in Changguan, such a crowded area with a lot of local residents, but then the services are not all open to their use. This is on a very valuable site. There are clinic and also dental clinics which I cannot use. I cannot enjoy the services. Why do I have to support this? Well, Undersecretary, Chairman, for this Changguan government office, there will be 6 government departments being moved there, and they will provide services that include the hospital authority. They will set up a general clinic, and also the labor department will have a employees compensation division set up there. As regards the Hong Kong Post Office, it will also have a post office and a delivery office set up there. The social welfare department will have a social security field unit in that building. As regards the ICAC, they will also have a regional office set up there to provide anti-corruption services to the public. And the Environmental Protection Department will also have a customer service counters set up there to process applications for environmental permits or licenses. So under this project, we will be able to provide frontline services to the residents. My question is not answered. $5.2 billion do we really need to spend so much money to build such a government complex? Well, of course, we have to be very stringent in using public money. Is there any way that we can save some money? And second, for the dental clinic, it's only for use of the public service, and also the general clinic and also the child center. These cannot be enjoyed by the general public. Can it be opened? Let me defer the question to our Department of Agricultural Services first. Mr. Wong Tak Chai. Thank you, Chairman. The project was opened for tendering in June 2019, and it's now completed. Well, the price, it's a returned tender prices. It reflects the actual market situation. When we compare this project with the immigration headquarters in Changguan, we can see that it is similar. The construction cost is similar to that project. Well, it's getting more and more expensive. These are taxpayers' money. You only spend about 10 odd pages to explain the project, and you ask for $5.2 billion, and you just said that it is similar to a previous project. But this is not for the use of the general public, and it is going to cause a lot of nuisance to the neighborhood. I understand that the chairman is quite familiar with the area, with the district as well. So I'd like to ask if you can make any savings from this proposed cost. Mr. Wong? Well, the design is not extravagant, and it is to meet the requirements or demands of the user departments. Yes, member asked about the clinic, the dental clinic. This is to provide service to the civil servants, because on the employment contracts of the civil servants, the dental services are included. So that is why the dental clinic is for use of the civil servants and eligible persons. Well, what I said was that this is such a prime site, and there are a lot of local residents in the Zhengguan-O district. You have a dental clinic, an outpatient clinic, and a childcare center. All these could only be enjoyed by the civil servants. That's the problem. I'm asking how you're going to answer this query from the Finance Committee. It seems that you have not done your homework properly. How can we conduct our discussion like this? Well, Chairman, as I have just answered Mr. Kwong, we are going to have 6 government departments moved to this complex, providing service to the general public. As regards the child center, there will be 100 seats organized by the NGOs in this childcare center. But then the further details will be finalized in due course. Well, just listen to what he said. Only the remaining seats will be open for the general public. It's totally unacceptable. Chairman, now they are asking for $5.2 billion to build a government office. I wonder whether you still remember only a few years ago, the government asked for $6 billion to build a building in Zhengguan-O for the Radio Hong Kong. So when you compare the prices, you will find it questionable. Of course, with the support or with the members from the pro-establishment camp, this has been vetoed. But I really don't understand why, when that proposal was put forward, you said that it would need $6 billion to build a new building for Radio Hong Kong. Well, this proposal had been vetoed anyway. But now you're asking for $6.2 billion to build these government offices. But for this new building, there will be 13 government offices that will share the premises. But then the Radio Hong Kong cannot use any of its space there. Is that true? I'll defer this question to our colleague from the Architectural Services Department. Ms. Tam, yes. On this site, a government office will be built. There will be no premises for the Radio Hong Kong. But then in Zhengguan-O, at first, Radio Hong Kong wanted to build a building in Zhengguan-O. But then we have not received a follow-up design plan from the Radio Hong Kong, or how they plan to develop or build a new building on the Zhengguan-O site. Well, you are saying that the Radio Hong Kong would need to suggest the design and how they want to build the building on that site. Is that true? Ms. Tam? In our department, our work is to reserve the plot of land for different government departments for use. Well, I'm not trying to be difficult. Of course, this may not be your responsibility, but very obviously the Radio Hong Kong, it's really in dire strait. Now I'd like to return to this building, the Zhengguan-O government office. There are heavy traffic, people and also vehicles. There are only 100 public parking spaces. Why is that so? Because on that site, there will be a lot of people and traffic. When the government offices are open there, would the situation be worsened? And the air pollution problem will be worsened as well. How come there's only so limited parking spaces in the complex? 13 departments altogether. Ms. Mo asked about the parking spaces, there are 100 parking spaces for the civil servants and also the public. Actually, in the basement, will be over 300 public parking spaces for. Okay, that's good. So there will be 300 parking spaces for the public. All right, my next question. The 3 blocks in Wan Chai, the existing blocks, they will be demolished right now, afterwards, right? They will not be revamped or refurnished for further use. So all 3 blocks will be demolished altogether? What a waste. What about the site after after demolishing the 3 blocks? How will it be used in the future? Chairman, there's 2 parts here. First, in Wan Chai, after the offices have been moved out, this site will be used for convention, exhibition, and also commercial uses. As regards ultimately how will it be used, or will the 3 blocks be reserved? I think we will leave it to the Department of Architectural Services to decide. Well, what you said is that the 3 blocks will not be demolished, right? Is that true? That's true. Let me reiterate. We are still studying the future plans for the site, so we do not have any details at this moment. All right, Mr. Lo Wai Kwok. Thank you, Chairman.
A member asked about the dental clinic in the new government office building. In terms of the public healthcare system of Hong Kong, dental services are severely lacking, and the public dental services are incomplete. So I believe Mr. Joseph Chan would not be able to answer this question today. Public dental services must be expanded imminently in order to tackle the current inadequacies, and this is something that could not be discussed at the Finance Committee. This is a fundamental problem that should be followed up upon later. The government has made it clear that they want to put sites into multiple uses, and they would strive to make the best use of land, especially for government projects. And the objective is to tackle different needs. In this project, they have addressed the needs by providing public parking spaces, with the demolition of the Wan Chai government offices compound. New buildings are provided elsewhere at West Kowloon, Kai Tak, etc. It's regrettable that the government has missed the opportunity to do something. So I hope now you can tell the public about the public parking spaces provided in this project, even though the details are already carried in the paper. I urge the government to consider multiple uses at a single site. You must maximize your opportunities in light of the land shortage in order to address different community needs. Undersecretary, like Dr. Low said, due to the scarce land resources in Hong Kong, our principle is to put sites into multiple uses, and where possible, we would come up with diverse development models in order to provide multiple public facilities and services. As for the parking spaces, we will provide 100 parking spaces for government vehicles and over 300 public parking spaces, including spaces for goods vehicles and coaches, private cars, motorcycles, and light buses. Thank you. Can you also explain the basic design for the car park, including the distribution of levels? I would defer to the Architectural Services Department. Who would take this question? Mr. Wong, Director. There would be 2 basement levels to accommodate the parking spaces, and these floors would also accommodate public vehicles. In the actual design, I suggest you to consider introducing even more parking spaces. We are talking about multiple government departments in the building. 100 parking spaces might not be enough. It's also necessary to introduce more public parking spaces. This is a territory-wide problem. If you consider commercial vehicles and private cars, the numbers exceed the amount of public and private parking spaces available, so the government should provide more public and private parking spaces where possible. Mr. Holden Chow, thank you. Chairman, for the Cheung Kwan O government offices, according to the paper, it will be a joint user government office building, and it will provide a government families clinic and government dental clinic for civil servants. I hope there would be some flexibility on the part of the government. At Tung Chung, we also have a dental clinic for civil servants. But to be honest, Tung Chung residents have been asking for such facilities to serve the public as well upon minor modifications. So long as the government is willing, something could be done. For the Cheung Kwan O government offices, you are investing a lot of resources in the building. Since the space is available, can you provide some flexibility for future contingencies? That way, the building will have the capacity to also provide dental services or allow the public to use the government dental clinic. I'm sure this will be welcomed by a lot of elderly people. I wonder whether the Bureau would consider providing some flexibility. So in terms of design and capacity, you can provide some flexibility so that by assigning more manpower, you can also serve the public in the government dental clinic. That would be a wiser use of resources. Mr. Chan? In terms of the design and space of the building, we have reserved a 10% provision to meet future needs and expansion. As for dental services, after the meeting, we would convey such view to the Department of Health. In terms of the capacity, design, and facilities of the building, you should provide for some flexibility. You said you would provide more than 300 public parking spaces. In terms of the distribution of public and government parking spaces, well, the general view of the public is that more parking spaces should be provided. According to the paper, you will provide more than 300 public parking spaces, but can you provide for some flexibility? Let's say if there is a great demand for parking spaces, would you be able to provide more spaces? So a number of members have touched upon this issue. Mr. Chan? I would defer to the Transport Department. Assistant Director, Mr. Eddie Leung. In terms of the government's policy on parking spaces, we would first cater for commercial vehicles, and where planning consideration allows an appropriate number of private parking spaces would be provided. But we would not encourage the use of private cars because it would increase the burden on roads. At the joint user building, an appropriate number of parking spaces would be provided, and the design must dovetail with the overall design. According to the RKSD, over 300 parking spaces, public parking spaces, will be provided. Is there any flexibility to accommodate even more spaces? We must consider the overall design of the building and the availability of the corridors to provide standard parking spaces. As things stand, more than 300 public parking spaces can be provided, including 100 public parking spaces for goods vehicles and coaches, and over 200 spaces for private cars, motorcycles, and light buses. In terms of future flexibility, apart from the 300 public parking spaces, there are 100 parking spaces for government vehicles. If necessary, once the building is commissioned, we will consider opening up those spaces during weekends and holidays for public use. We will proceed to a break after Mr. Yang asks his question. 5 minutes, please. I have a more fundamental question. The paper said that 13 government buildings would be transferred to the new joint user government office building. What are the justifications in identifying these 13 departments? These departments are scattered in different locations. Why are they going to be relocated to Tranquano? Who would take this question? Ms. Leonia Tai, Government Property Administrator. The main purpose of the project is to re-provision the 3 buildings at the Wan Chai Government Offices compound. As mentioned in the paper, 3 departments will be re-provisioned in the building. For those who have leased private premises, they would also be re-provisioned in the new building in order to achieve rent savings. We also want to accommodate departments in other government-owned premises. So at the end, we will re-provision 13 departments in this building. Paragraph 5A of the paper mentioned the 13 departments, and the footnote explains the 13, or the footnote names the 13 departments. Footnote 5, the Innovation and Technology Commission. Would the entire department be relocated to TKOGO, or would they still have other offices at other locations? For the ITC, it is mainly located in the Wan Chai compound, so it will be fully reprovisioned. And footnote 5 also mentions other departments in government-owned premises. So basically, these departments will be provisioned in their entirety. In terms of the child care center for government employees, how many children could be accommodated, or how many civil servants could be served? This is a pilot project. In order, as part of the government's family-friendly employment policy, the initial plan is to provide 100 places, but the actual details remain to be decided. There will be 100 places. In other words, 100 children could be served. Would the service be contracted out? It would be operated by the Social Welfare Department, but as usual, it would be operated by an independent NGO. Would any fees be charged on the civil servants? The SWD is still working out the details, including the fees charged. I want to ask about the recurrent expenditure under paragraph 16. It would be about $183.9 million. Can you provide a breakdown? The annual recurrent expenditure includes electricity costs, electricity tariffs, phone tariffs, maintenance of the building, property management costs, security, and staff costs.
Do you have further breakdowns? Well, basically, they covers electricity bills about 20%, and for maintenance about 30%, and staff costs about 30%. Chairman, this is a recommendation. If it involves especially government buildings, I hope that we'll be able to have breakdown, if not breakdown, maybe the average cost per meter, so that we can compare the cost with similar projects. I hope that in future we'll be able to have this kind of information in the paper submitted by the administration. This is my suggestion. Thank you. Yes, we will take heed of that. Thank you. Now we will have a 10 minutes break. Let's resume after 10 minutes.